Joe Biden and US First Lady Jill Biden hosted a state dinner for Narendra Modi at the White House.
Now, the US President and Indian Prime Minister said the two democracies' partnership would define the next century. The state dinner, it marked just the third such honor of Biden's presidency.
We are right now at the state banquet, which has been kept in the honor of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Now, we know that it's part of the diplomatic protocol, and this is the official state visit. So, all the highest diplomatic protocol is being followed. Now, who's who of the United States and India are present here in this dinner, and we know that this has been a hectic day essentially with the Indian Prime Minister being honored, and then of course we saw the Indian Prime Minister's address to the US Congress. But all in all, a very productive and a day which will be seen as a milestone day in India-US relationship, now coming to a close with an official state banquet in the honor of the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. It has vegetarian food, millets as well, something that India has been pointing to, the use of millets and something that India has been terming as superfood. Siddhant Sibal for WION at the state banquet at the White House in Washington, D.C.
A state dinner honoring a visiting head of government or reigning monarch is one of the grandest and most glamorous White House affairs. The traditional toasts exchanged by the two leaders at the dinner offer an important platform for the continuation of serious dialogue.
A toast to our wonderful hosts, President Biden and Dr. Jill Biden. A toast to good health, prosperity, and the pursuit of happiness, to liberty, equality, and fraternity, and to the everlasting bonds of friendship between India and the United States. Cheers.
Cheers. Toast to our partnership, to our people, to the possibilities that lie ahead, to two great friends, two great nations, and two great powers. Cheers.
The Indian Prime Minister hailed cultural ties between the world's largest democracies. The 3.5 million plus strong Indian American community is an important ethnic group in the United States, accounting for about 1% of the total population in the country.
जैसे जैसे समय गुजर रहा है, हमारे लोगों में और एक दूसरे के प्रति समझ और बढ़ रही है, एक दूसरे के नामों का सही उच्चारण कर पाते हैं, एक दूसरे के एक्सेंट को समझ पाते हैं। भारत में बच्चे हैलोवीन पर स्पाइडरमैन बनते हैं और अमेरिका के युवा नाटू नाटू पर डांस करते हैं।
Washington and New Delhi have been moving closer for over 2 decades now. Successive US presidents have displayed bipartisan support for stronger ties with the emerging Asian economy and regional power. President Joe Biden has built on that legacy and expanded cooperation even further.
That's not all, of course. The Indian Prime Minister also took the centre stage in a rare honour demonstrating the deepening India-US ties. Prime Minister Modi made his second address to the US Congress.
The Indian Prime Minister received a rousing welcome as he delivered a speech to Congress, celebrating the growing ties and shared ambitions of the world's two largest democracies.
Of the Republic of India.
Clouds of coercion and confrontation are casting their shadow in the Indo-Pacific. The stability of the region has become one of the central concerns of our partnership. We share a vision of a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific. Connected by secure seas, defined by international law, free from domination, and anchored in ASEAN centrality.
The Indian Prime Minister also spoke about the menace of terror and asserted that there should be no ifs and buts when it comes to combating terrorism.
Ladies and gentlemen, terrorism is an enemy of humanity, and there can be no ifs and buts in dealing with it. We must overcome all such forces sponsoring and exporting terror.
The Indian Prime Minister also praised the role of Indian Americans and hailed the US Vice President's Indian roots, drawing applause from congressmen.
There are millions here who have roots in India. Some of them sit proudly in this chamber. And there is one behind me who has made history. I am told that the Samosa caucus is now the flavor of the house. I hope it grows and brings the full diversity of Indian cuisine here. Giving a voice to the global South is the way forward. That is why I firmly believe that the African Union be given full membership of G20. We must revive multilateralism and reform multilateral institutions. With better resources and representation that applies to all our global institutions of governance, especially the United Nations.
And for more on this, we're now being joined by our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibal. We have with us Susan Tehrani and also our correspondent, Molly Gambhir. Molly, coming to you first, it's been an eventful evening, of course. So what can you tell us about the state dinner, the key highlights here?
With an eye on mutual interests, India and the United States are taking the step forward when it comes to deepening their partnership on multiple levels. The Indian Prime Minister's state visit, the maiden state visit to the United States, seeing defense deals and tech ties underpinning the messaging of the visit. But it's been quite quite a day with a jam-packed schedule that the Indian Prime Minister has had here in the United States with a series of engagements. The Indian Prime Minister held those bilateral discussions with President Biden, post which he addressed the joint session of the US Congress, and post which now we saw him at the state banquet engaging with the American president and sharing some light-hearted moments really with the two leaders being teetotalers. President Biden also talking about how he's been told by his grandfather that if you're toasting without alcohol in your hand, you should do it with your left hand. The personal chemistry really between the two leaders on full display as well, something that the Indian Prime Minister mentioned during his address to the joint session of the US Congress as well, where he talked about how the chemistry of the relations between the two sides is effortless. And that was evident in the personal equation between the two leaders as well, who have met multiple times. But this was the first time that the Indian Prime Minister is here on a state visit, which is the highest expression of friendly bilateral ties. And American President Joe Biden calling this a productive visit, and it has been with the two countries realizing the growing importance of them being reliable partners in sectors cutting across defense, technology, also lifting of barriers as far as sharing of technology is concerned through ISET, the initiative on through ISET, and also, of course, the GF414 deal, which has been a crucial element. But there's also space, there's climate change, something that the two leaders spoke about as a part of their joint statement as well. But given that the two sides are hoping to deepen their partnership, also to counter China, that also is an issue that found a prominent mention in the address of the two leaders earlier in the day, where they spoke about stability in the Indo-Pacific and how that has been a continuing concern and a shared concern of the two sides.
Thank you for those insights, Molly. Siddhant, coming to you next. Pivotal moment for India-US ties. What were the highlights from the Indian Prime Minister's Congress address?
Well, Shivan, you know, his speech at the US Congress was a landmark speech, second time an Indian Prime Minister addressing the US Congress. But he talked about how transformational India-US ties are for the world. He talked about various aspects like democracy, what the Indian government has been doing under his flagship programs. He talked about Pakistan, talking about the issue of terrorism. He talked about Russia-Ukraine conflict as well. But essentially, his message was clear that the relationship between India and United States is an important relationship. This is a relationship that gives direction to the world, and these two democracies need to have more convergences than divergences. In fact, if I talk about today's day was a pretty busy day. It was pretty long day as well, but it will be a day that will be remembered in the history of India-US relationship as a milestone day, as the Indian Prime Minister almost made 5 or 6 speeches from the south lawn of the White House to the US Capitol, to just short while ago at the banquet. And the message was that there is a celebration of this relationship. This relationship has evolved over last 2 decades, and this is a relationship which will be growing at a time when the world is going through great geopolitical contestation with rise of a very aggressive China.
Right. Well, Siddhant, thank you for that. Susan, coming to you now, the leaders, they've been speaking about a turn in relations for the next century. What does this state visit by Indian Prime Minister mean for US-India relationship going forward? Susan, can you hear me?
Yeah, there's a bit of a delay. I'm having some audio problems. Moving forward, this relationship really signifies a new era of partnership. And as President Biden noted, it's the defining relationship of the 21st century. And we heard Prime Minister Modi also allude to that during his address to Congress. But what we mean about this relationship being dynamic is we know that there's new areas of cooperation after this meeting between the two leaders: healthcare, human space flight, sending Indian astronauts to the Space Center, tackling the climate crisis, critical tech, quantum computing, AI, semiconductors, and then, the growing defense partnership between the two sides, which is one of the biggest of the United States, considering the fact that once Prime Minister Modi's trip is finished, the United States and India will be in a defense partnership that's probably as big as the United States with its allies, NATO countries. And of course, India is not a NATO country, but it's such a viable partner in the Indo-Pacific that the United States is keen to share its technology and know-how with India. This really establishes a sense of trust between the two sides. And also, for the optics of it, as America and India's adversaries are watching, they see this partnership moving forward, notably China, other countries, but it's also, in that sense, internationally, it's very important. I do want to talk about the Quad as well. Being part of the Quad, this was something that was mentioned between Joe Biden and Prime Minister Modi. The Quad was mentioned in many ways. And then also, they talked about the importance of the G20. During the press conference, Prime Minister Modi sort of alluded to the fact that President Biden was on board for bringing the African Union into the G20. He also mentioned that during his speech to Congress. So it seems like something that's moving forward and some kind of breakthrough in that regard as well. But moving forward, another thing that both leaders wanted to emphasize on, and I know we've talked about it a lot, but it's the people-to-people connection and relationship, which will ultimately really cement the ties.
Right.
Thank you for all those insights, Susan. WION's correspondent Siddhant Sibal, Susan Tehrani, Molly Gambhir, getting you all the updates from the US.